topic that we have chosen for today's discussion is China, Russia, and India, the rise of Euro-Asian age. That topic is very, very important and serious, particularly from the context of globalization and paradigm shift of globalization. We can see the emergence of the rise of Southeast Asia, not from the realm of just economics, but also politics. And we can see the new paradigm so far as the technological innovation is concerned. So it is not just a first world capital and third world labor, but it is a deepening globalizing process, which we can see. And China is evolving with a spirit of colonization. We can see that spirit in the context, and now we can see that spirit in the context of global. So we are revisiting the world system and world system theory. So this topic is very, very important and very pertinent to be discussed. Now I request Dr. Tamanna ji to share her presentation, and we are very likely to be joined by Professor Mohanty and Ananta. So Tamanna ji, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So the title of the book, China, Russia, India, the rise of a new Euro-Asian age, it came to me after I read an article actually by David Bessner in Harper's Magazine on what comes after American century. So the author, Daniel Bessner, was like, he spoke about the fact that during the First World War, America was reluctant to take to participate in any of these wars, etc. And the Republican oligarch Henry Luke in the American century said that this is in the article titled American Century, argued that it was the result of US immature refusal to accept the mantle of leadership that this particular World War happened. So Luke said in the Second World War, after the Japanese and Germany, Nazi Germany came to power, US had to step in, and it was then the US century started, and just as the US had conquered the American West, the nation would subdue, civilize, and remake international relations. So US, coming in of US changed the whole world's looking at what the world politics is. Earlier, it was the British and the French who were ruling, through colonialism. Now the nature of colonialism itself changed. So what was really happening was that neoliberalism was coming into being. So, after Pearl Harbor, US took the whole, it took the charge of the world in that sense, if we would say that. So you could say that the American century had arrived by Second World War. While most empires traditionally relied on seizure and occupation of vast territories, as I just mentioned, mentioned about the US, Britain and France, but the US built military bases around the world to project its power. From these outposts, it launched wars that killed millions, protected a capitalist system that benefited the wealthy, and threatened any power, democratic or otherwise, that had temerity to disagree with it. So, And this is the critique which Daniel Bessner has on American century. As Luke desired, by the end of the 20th century, the US, a nation founded after one of the first modern anti-colonial revolutions, had become a world-spanning empire. The city on a hill had evolved into a fortified metropolis. But in the past 6 years, two transformational events have begun to shape the US place in the world. Firstly was the election of Donald Trump, who suggested to domestic and foreign audiences alike that the country might not be forever beholden to the idea that global leadership was a vital American interest. So Donald Trump wanted to move out of American interface, be it Obama, be it Bush. I mean, name any of the prime presidents out there. They were like liberal internationalists. They were like spreading liberalism worldwide. They were fighting for democracy, etc. But Donald Trump, for the first time, said that we have to be concerned. We have to be concerned about ourselves rather than the world. To withdraw. So, a liberal international order was what he was against. Trump approached international relations as any corrupt businessman would. He tried to get the most while giving the least. He thus withdrew from several international organizations and agreements, including Range, Nuclear Force Treaty, Paris Climate Agreement, the Iran nuclear deal, the WHO, the Open Skies Treaty, and initiated trade wars intended to boost American business. I mean, after all, he was a businessman. That's a perspective of if he was an academic like Obama, he would have thought probably a bit differently, but he was a businessman, so he had a different perspective on international relations. Taken with bellicose rhetoric, these actions demonstrated that the world could no longer assume that US is committed to defending the geopolitical status quo. Second, the emergence of China. So first is, the coming in of Trump. And the second is the emergence of China as an economic and military powerhouse has decisively ended the unipolar moment of the 90s and the 2000s. The country now only recently referred to as rising tiger. Orientalism never dies, now boasts, according to some measures, the largest military and economy on the earth. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank offer alternatives to the World Bank, IMF, and other Western-dominated institution, which, to put it mildly, aren't exactly beloved in the global South. So, because it has been known that World Bank, IMF, etc., are extremely exploitative, and many of these countries have to. If you look at Pakistan right now, like they're like literally begging them to give them money, and the debt which happens after that is like it's killing for the country. How much to give. So Chinese initiative has brought about a difference in the whole perspective of the world scenario. For the first time since the collapse of Soviet Union, the US confronts a nation whose model, a blend of capitalism and socialism and a communist party discipline, presents a genuine challenge to liberal democratic capitalism, which seems increasingly incapable of addressing the many crises that besets it. China's rise and the glimmer of alternative world that might accompany it makes clear that Luke's American century is in its final days. So that's what Bessner feels. And from it's from there, like the whole thought about, which countries are really doing well came to my mind. And I immediately, these were the countries which came to my mind, though there are others also, and we'll discuss about them also as well. But the GDP of all these countries are really high. So yeah, it's not obvious, however, what comes next. Are we doomed to witness the return of great power rivalry in which US and China vie for influence, or to witness the return of great power rivalry in US and China via for influence. Um, in these waning days of American century, Washington's foreign policy establishment, the think tanks that define the limits of the possible, has splintered into two warring camps. Defending the status quo are the liberal internationalists. So I'll just talk about two kind of ideologies which are right now taking place in US. So liberal internationalists insist that the US should retain its position of global armed primacy. Against them stand the restrainers, who urge a fundamental rethinking of US approach to foreign policy, away from militarism and towards peaceful form of international engagement. The outcome of this debate will determine whether the US remains committed to an atavistic foreign policy ill-suited to the 21st century, or whether the nation will take seriously the disaster of past decade, abandon the hubris that has caused so much suffering worldwide, and finally embrace a grand strategy of restraint. So the principle of liberal internationalism was basically articulated by Woodrow Wilson, and it was carried on by many of the others like Roosevelt, Truman, George Bush. George Bush, for example, he put together a coalition of willing to invade Iraq and insisted that his wars were being waged to spread democracy. So that is what liberal internationalism was all about. It was like we are spreading democracy everywhere, and we are protecting democracy, which was actually not true, because democracy was not even practiced in US. You have so much of censorship, you have so much of surveillance there. So, what kind of democracy is this? If Obama could sit in his Oval Office and, kill Osama, then, you can see the level of surveillance they have. I'm not supporting Osama, but I'm just telling you that, the level of surveillance they have, if they can look at the person in another country, then what about the people who are like residing in their own countries? How can they escape this thing? So yeah, this is not to say liberal internationalists are living in the past. They appreciate that unlike during the World War II or the Cold War, most countries agree on the rules of games. Neither China nor even Iran and Venezuela reject the Western international order in the way Nazi Germany and Soviet Union did. While states may break rules to advance their interest, few countries are genuine pariahs. In fact, Russia and North Korea might be the only ones. So now, for example, earlier it wasn't so, but um, Russia now is a pariah. It's a country which is uh, you know seen as a total outcast in the international relations. But it has support, and we will discuss that. So let me just discuss a bit of other things. This raises the question for liberal internationalists: how should the US compete in the new world and contain threats to established order? Unfortunately, most have converged on an answer to the past. Whether they call it democratic multilateralism or fully developed democracy strategy, liberal internationalists hope to establish a coalition of democracies akin to one that existed during the Cold War, although the time centered on democracies, or at least non-autocracies in the global south. So the West is trying to make a collision of democracies. People. Why do you think that uh, Russia and China are being looked in a very different way than India? We lately PM Modi went to US, PM Modi went to France, PM Modi went to UAE. Many of these places, and the respect he got out there. All that was like, because they are looking at partners. So that partnership of global south can come from a country like India, which believes in democracy, obviously we have our problems. We don't say we don't have our problems. We do have our problems because we are a diverse country. We have minorities, and like there are tensions, but still they can be forgiven by West, for example, because India is now the fifth largest, has the fifth largest GDP, and very soon we'll be the third most biggest GDP producers. So yeah, like their Cold War predecessors, liberal internationalists believe that their struggle for democracy and against China, which they regard as a major threat to US power, will last indefinitely. As Brooklyn Institute report, the US must prepare for a superpower marathon, an economic and technology race, and China that is like unlikely to reach a definitive conclusion. American society, the liberal internationalist above, will have to remain on a war footing for the foreseeable future. Peace is unthinkable. The Chinese military, which employs more active personnel than that of any nation, is of particular concern to liberal internationalists. To combat the threat of Chinese coercion in East Asia, they endorse a strategy in which US retains 10,000 of troops in Japan and Korea, South Korea. So, the politics of trans-Pacific regions, that is what is US is now doing, protecting Taiwan, for example, but, to prevent a third world war, no country would want to have a nuclear war. So, so they have deployment of their own military bases there, in South Korea and Japan, which are allies to US. So yeah. On the one hand, they worry that China would wield its economic power to force other countries to abide by its wishes. On the other, they believe free exchange is vital to the US economic health. Liberal internationalists thus recommend that the nation adopt an approach whereby it pressures China economically, but within the bounds of international rules, norms, and laws. In this way, they hope to combat China without discerning liberalism's writ large. As this suggests, liberal internationalists are well aware of beating the American prestige has taken in recent years, especially after the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the 2008 financial crisis. If the US is to dominate, it has to abide by rules that in the past it was too happy to break. So the whole things are changing. It's more like a global South, and in the G20 summit, which is happening right now. PM Modi is talking a lot about the leadership of the global South. Because most percentage of people are in the global South. I mean, I'm just forgetting the number of people who are located in global South, but yeah, majority of them are there in this particular area and are developing countries and are seeking help from each other. And India can show the leadership in this particular area. And India has done that, as far as the COVID pandemic was concerned. India gave vaccines to many of these countries. India is trying to spread its wings in Africa as well. The way earlier Americans, Russians, and now Chinese have tried to spread themselves in these areas. But the problem with them is, for example, China, is that they like force the debt on all these African countries. So India can be a more democratic force and help them become real democracies. I'm not saying that we don't have any problems, in our democracy. We do have problems, but yet we have a constitution which is we have opposition parties who can challenge the government, and the government, if it goes to the other side, it can challenge uh, uh, the ruling party. So democracies are important that way. Unlike China, which has one party democracy, one party rule, India has multiple party rule. So, the chaos is always there, but the government is always wary of the opposition, the criticism to them. So, yeah. So restrainers, by contrast, understand that American century is over. They maintain that expansive use of US military has benefited neither the US nor the world, and that charting a positive course in the 21st century requires taking a root and branch approach to the principles that have guided US foreign policy since World War II. Restrainers want to reduce the US presence abroad, shrink the defense budget, restore Congress constitutional authority to declare war, and ensure that ordinary Americans actually have a say in what their country does abroad. The origins of restraint can be traced to George Washington's farewell address of September 1976, in which the president warned against entangling our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice. 25 years later, on July 1821, the Secretary of State, John Adams, likewise insisted that a defining characteristic of US was that it had abstained from interference in concerns of others. She goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. Restraint remained popular for much of the 19th and the earlier 20th century. During the World War, for instance, Wilson received substantial criticism from those who course the history of US foreign policy is far from one of restraint. From its beginning, the US expanded westwards, displacing and killing indigenous people, and eventually seizing a number of populated colonies in Pacific and Caribbean. Nevertheless, if restraint did not always apply in practice, the strategy attracted many adherents. Things changed during World War II when restraint became associated with anti-Semitic, anti-America firsters, politically marginal libertarians and pacifists, and discredited isolationists. In Democratic Party, the former Vice President Henry Wallace and other progressive restrainers were sidelined, as was this is the whole history of US. So this is the what this is what the David Bessner's article started saying about this thing. Now, if we look at China during Mao's regime gained major powers during the Maoist area till the 1970s, and then the Deng Xiaoping came into power, and many others, the party CPC presidents came over. But she was more like Mao. She is more like Mao. So he has his own he has his own advisors. He has his own theory, and that is what is running China right now. He has written several papers, several books, which are spread across the for Chinese, and he has people like Wang Huning, who is this political advisor to Xi Jinping, and all of them are in their 60s, for example. And so following a quarter century of robust double-digit economic growth, China is now poised to overtake the US as the world's largest economy in purchasing power terms within 2 to 3 decades. So you can understand that. When this happens, China will not only be ending a 150 years of US reign, but will also be reclaiming the primacy it first obtained a millennium earlier, when it pulled away from Western Europe to become the biggest economy on the planet. Today, the Chinese factory to the world is producing not only garments and toys, but computer components, cars, aircrafts, sets aside even higher. The Chinese have successfully launched manned space missions, something only 2 other nations have managed before, and now India also. And so now we have 4 countries which have been able to reach the space and are planning further space explorations. So India, for example, is now flexing its muscles, and it's like competing at the international level. Anyways, we'll discuss India subsequently. They are investing heavily in technologies of future such as nanotechnology and fuel cells that will help their nation cement a leadership position in economic arena as well as in world politics. Naturally, China's continuous economic progress depends on its ability to contain or overcome numerous problems, a manifestation of remaining and often. Whereas the 3 decades of 20th century witnessed China rising onto the global economic stage, the first 3 decades of the 21st century are almost certain to bring with them the completion of that rise, not only in economic but also in political and geopolitical terms. China is now the second largest economy in the world as measured by national accounts and is well on the way to becoming the largest economy in real terms in that not too distant future. The Chinese economy has contributed positively to world economic growth for decades, even during the financial crisis, global financial crisis, in which strong domestic growth played a pivotal role in ensuring that world economic growth stayed in positive territory. So yeah, since the Chinese government launched its reforms, the economy has been taking off with extraordinary speed for almost 3 decades. If the economy continues to grow at such an astronomical pace, China will be in position to surpass the US in the next few decades. China's rise has an immediate impact on every aspect of Western society, both in opportunities and in challenges for other countries. So, the tussle is really between US and China, and that is why it's seeking friends who are the enemies of China. So for example, now India, they are wanting to have better relationships, much better defense relationships with India, so that they are like friends together. The way they got the treatment are in fact, if you remember, in 2000 George Bush said, I have never heard of India before that, before 2000. So early we have risen to such a power. And yeah, so US after power transitions usually come with international conflicts. Rising powers want to gain more power authority in the global system, and declining countries are afraid of loss of their dominant position. Thus conflict, even a war between a rising power and a declining power, is likely to happen. In this sense, Westerners worry that historical tragedies will repeat between US and China. Many Americans think that China's rise is weakening Western societies and fostering fears in US and the Asian Pacific region, while China is using Western capital to build up its strength. As early as 1997, Richard Bernstein and Bruce Monroe, in their book The Coming Conflict with China, argued that war between China and US was a distinct possibility. So, and Fareed Zakaria goes further, saying that when a new power rises, it inevitably disturbs the balance of power. So obviously the balance of power between countries is being changed very much, and new groups are being formed. Be it any of these SEO, or many groups are being formed, unlike NATO, which was formed much earlier. Now you have many others which have been formed. So China needs to reassure US that China's rise is not a threat and will not challenge America's dominant position. To build China into a rich country with a strong army has been dream of Chinese for many generations. Since the Opium War started in the mid of 19th century, China had been in a state of semi-colony for 100 years. This century of humiliation was a dark period in Chinese history. So, they have suffered, they have had their own price of humiliation, was which was very humiliating to Chinese. And they were working hard towards building an economy after the communist revolution, to build a nation which is in par with any of the larger countries. So yeah, China has become an economic giant in international economic system, a political partner to all the major countries, and a military modernizing regional power. Moreover, China has changed from an outsider to an active participant to all major international government and organizations. I mean, it's hard to ignore. Kya? I mean, like, you just don't you can't ignore now China at all, nor can you now ignore India. Because these countries are like developed, though China still calls itself a developing country, but within let's say 20 years they would be way ahead. So yeah, in the post-Cold War scenario, the West has no dearth of theories talking about the end of history, clash of civilization, etc. But rise of China has questioned all these theories, and new system of world seems to be seen in the world system. But China's present a new challenge to American hegemony past few decades. He has maneuvered to third term in 20th CCP. As she has introduced a new system into play in the new developed China. Rather than being a pragmatic and non-ideological, it has developed into a new system of Marxist nationalism. So that's what I was also trying to say, when after Mao, it's Xi Jinping who is somebody who has written about Lenin and Mao extensively, and that is the ideology he's following. His opponents are thrashed majorly, like lately. I mean, I guess 2-3 days back, their finance minister disappeared somewhere. So many of their actresses, etc. There have been cases like that. So they are like a majorly one-party system, and now Xi Jinping's rule is established majorly. He's taken over China completely. Under Xi Jinping, just like Mao, ideology drives policy rather than otherwise. She has pushed politics to Leninist left, economics to Marxist left, and foreign policy to nationalist right. So, you can say it is a leftist and a rightist government. It's rightist as far as the foreign policy is concerned, and it's a leftist as far as the economic policy is concerned. So meanwhile, he has stroked nationalism by pursuing an increasing assertive foreign policy, turbocharged by Marxist-inspired belief that history is on the China's side. So Marxists always believe that history is linear, and socialism is at the end of century. So that is what was the response of Samuel P. Huntington to him, the clash of civilizations. And yeah. So, and world anchored Chinese power would produce a more just order. So they believe that Chinese politics, Chinese ideology will produce a more uh, um, just order. So Xi Jinping is being seen as an ideological man in current Chinese century. She blended ideological purity with technocratic pragmatism. West ignores Xi's ideological messaging at its own jeopardy. Xi's policies are having effect not only of the real world content of Chinese politics and foreign policy, and thus also in the world politics. Like all Marxist-Leninists, Xi bases his philosophy on historical materialism and dialectical materialism. Historical materialism in Chinese context, according to Xi, means move towards a more advanced stage of socialism alongside seeing the downswing of capitalism. This will be the real end of history. So Fukuyama's this is totally a breakaway from liberal Japanese Fukuyama's views. So yeah, Deng's open economy would be replaced by Xi's statist economic orthodoxy. These ideas might seem historic to people outside China, but are taken seriously by Chinese political class and elites. Xi Jinping, in his speeches, said that ideological decay led to downfall of Soviet Union. According to him, disintegration of a regime begins from ideological area, and the West is vying for its people's heart, and so Marxist ideology has to be chiefly guarded from Western interference. Um, okay, I'll just stop. I'll just talk about Russia now. Um, Now, as far as Russia is concerned, the course of Russian development over the past decade has explicitly shown that both internal milieu and foreign policy domain has expressed staggering signs of radicalization and growing division between us, that is ethnic Russians, and them, non-Russian citizens and foreigners. So basically, there has been a rise worldwide of right, be it China, be it China as we, it's a leftist country, but like their perspective is rightist, as far as dealing with foreign policy is concerned, and so is Russia, and right now many of the European countries, India, US, many of these countries and them. The grim irony of contemporary Russian extensively appealing to the legacy of great patriotic war as a pivotal aspect of Russian identity is that xenophobia, racial hatred, and ultra-far right nationalism have by far outgrown the level of street radicals, and in one form or another have penetrated various layers of Russian multi-ethnic and multicultural society. Currently, the number of national organizations actively operating in Russian Federation may have reached 50 through to 22 of them being ultra-nationalist and 8 completely prohibited. Lessons drawn from Russian historical experience have explicitly pointed out one curious tendency. Facing a vital necessity of reform, Russian ruling and intellectual elites have usually opted for relying on a fuzzy notion called conservatism that served as the main vehicle of anti-reformist, reactionary, and anti-democratic forces. So, I mean, if you see these things, if you compare China and Russia, you'll see this phenomenon via both being friendly to each other because their perspectives are almost similar now. They are undemocratic. They are not reformist in the political way. They are reactionary. So, yeah. The issue of conservatism, extensively promoted during Romanov dynasty, reached its apex when the monarchy encountered with a broad array of challenges brought about by urgent necessity of modernization and reforms that coincided with humiliating defeat in Russia-Japanese War. So, in the early 1990s, the most visible and well-organized actor among Russian far right was the Russian National Unity. Its militarized underground structure held attributes and symbols similar to the ones used in Nazi Germany and slogans such as "Glory to Russia." Sentiments that defined the conceptual outlook of this group did to a significant extent reflect the pervasive moods and feelings within Russian society, resurging anti-Semitism, explicit anti-Caucasian stance, and anti-Americanism. Another branch called so-called Nazi skinhead did not have a core organization and was mostly represented by a wide range of incoherent organization enjoying various extent of growth. So, so Putin's return to office, the war in Ukraine and Russia's neo-nationalistic dilemma has been the concern of the world lately. In final analysis, it was decision of Putin to return to power that triggered a new lap of frictions within Russian nationalist circles. Certain groups openly opposed this idea. For instance, the so-called ethnic nationalists assumed hostile attitude towards Kremlin primarily because of alleged discrimination of ethnic Russians as a result of illegal migration and financial support of the North Caucasus. Such organizations as Russian Movement, the Movement Against Illegal Migration, and the Russian National Democratic Party, the Slavic Alliance, and the Northern Brotherhood extensively supported the Slavic neo-pagans, neo-Nazi groups, explicitly voiced their concerns over the trajectory of development of Russian society. So this is very similar to what is happening right now in the world, in many countries, so I mean, it's not just Russia, for example. So yeah. Um, in order to understand the role of nationalist ideology in post-2012 Russia, one needs to take closer look at both internal and external factors that have played crucial role in transformation of Kremlin's goals and strategies related to phenomena. Aggressive perception of the outer world reflected in the sphere of influence approach and explicit anti-West sentiments have contributed to the changing role of xenophobic and ultra-nationalistic group and organization in Russian Federation. So, this is from here where, because Russia had a major influence in the world. And that is what, with the coming of Putin, this particular aspect was emphasized that, Russia needs to get back its position, which it has lost after Soviet Union's demise. So, and that is why the whole xenophobia and racism, etc., and the war against Crimea, the war against Ukraine, and everything, just to grow bigger in stature, in contrast to the West, and like the against NATO spread in eastwards. So they were really against that particular aspect, and Putin for being open.
Maybe Dr. Tamanna, thank you. I'm happy to be able to join in. So maybe you can kindly, complete your presentation in 5 minutes so that we can
Yes.
have some times for discussion, please.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so this is what was like what I was trying to say. And as far as India is concerned, India by 2050 would be a definite power. And I mean, each successive government, be it opposition or be it the current government, is progressing much better in growth and in GDP, etc. And the military dimension of India is increasing big way. The Chandrayaan-3, which lately was launched, in areas where the South Pole of Moon, where no other country has yet ventured, and the new military pacts which we are having with different countries like Australia, India, France, US. Wherever we go, we have military actions together. So India's national interest and diplomatic activism is being lauded everywhere. Like our foreign minister is doing a real good job, as far as diplomatic relations are concerned. And, our diplomats are working day in and day out to pressurize other governments, where development can be done in India, and made in India, etc. These policies are being built. And India has given a befitting reply to China, for example, and in the Tawang area, and many of the areas of Arunachal Pradesh, for example. So China is not India is not going to be taken so lightly by China now. China earlier thought that they could just get easily away with it, but India is now being supported by many other countries which have their own interest in mind against China, for example. But we are being supported, And so democracy is the biggest strength of India. And I guess India, in collaboration, India, for example, has to have collaborate. We are collaborating with Russia, for example, despite the fact that it's a very autocratic in nature, Putin's nature, but we have been friends for centuries. So we cannot do away with Russia. And the fact that if we would have not bought petrol from them, we could have seen Russia, Pakistan, and China coming together. So our diplomacy has worked very well. And we also led the West by our neutrality position. So yeah, so I guess just a minute, I'll just finish it off in a second. So yeah, these countries are the ones which would be the, but we cannot take what I also in my book I have in mind is that जैसे हम हिंदी में बोलते हैं, आप अमेरिका को हल्के में मत लीजिए. Don't take it lightly. It's a country which has amazing power, and they have an amazing public, public spirit. So don't take it lightly. And just saying that these countries are doing well doesn't mean that America is going to disappear, or it will not do well or something. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tamanna. Randhir, how are you, Randhir? So I can pick up the link from.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So maybe I would just pick up the links a bit, and then we can have conversation as we move ahead. The whole challenge of Eurasia, the coming of the Eurasian age. Now it poses a challenge to Eurocentrism and this whole North Atlantic hegemony. But is it only a geopolitical thing, or there is the possibility of something new? Now, from your presentation, we mainly get the geopolitical interest and rise. But some of these, descriptions, like you were saying that the Chinese economy is growing, but it was growing some time ago. Now it is in a different position. And similarly, contemporary India, your description of contemporary India and its so-called, foreign policy triumph. So if we look at realistically, there are a lot of challenges also. So is it a triumphalist account, of contemporary India as it is proposed by the ruling party? Now, this whole mission to the moon also has to be understood in the context of the technological capability of our society. You look at, even we are not able to produce the cell phone. Now, I request your reflection, what is there that on the one hand, India is sending the mission to the moon, and it is so, helplessly dependent on buying cell phone from others. So this is one side.
Okay.
And yes, and secondly, now along with the geopolitical dynamics, what are the alternatives emerging from these spaces? Because the people's voices are not here in your account. And so I request your reflections on this.
As far as you're talking about geopolitics, I guess what the world right now needs is a proper democratic system, and a system which respects diversity, which does not have a one-party rule. I mean, I am born and brought up in India, but I have a constitution in my country which has borrowed from the world. So we have borrowed the best from the world over. So till the time we, it's not just geopolitical, it's all about ideology also. So I mean, it's just not that wars are happening or something. It's also about the ideology which we are selling to, for example, Africa. They have terrorist groups out there. So how to help them out there. Our aim should be that as a country which is rising up, we give a helping hand to other countries also. For example, Africa, the Africans are facing in Sudan, for example, they're facing a lot of problems. So till the time that doesn't happen, I guess the half of the world is still in poverty. All those things have to be taken care of, and India can help in medical aid, for example, to these countries, etc. And as far as Chinese, you were saying, sir, Chinese have seen a bit of it, because during the pandemic time, the GDP obviously fell, and so, but I'm sure they will gain it back. So I don't suspect Chinese businesses too much, So I mean, I'm sure that they will do well in that. So yeah.
Thank you. Now let us have other questions, please. We will take all the questions at one go, and you can come towards the end, please. So other friends. Luigi. Okay. Randhir, your thought on the matter, please.
Yeah, excuse me, but I have some difficulties. Well, I thank you very much. I was reflecting on the many points which were discussed. Well, I was thinking at on the problem, on the question of the destabilization, because I think that the opposition to the BRICS is now characterized by, on the one hand, there is this huge war against Russia, which was prepared, because it is more than 10 years, in my opinion, that this war has been foreseen and prepared. On the other hand, there is one of the warm hot point of the Pacific will be Taiwan, because we have seen that there are continuous provocations against China from the opposition to BRICS as regards Taiwan, and as regards the question related to the two countries or one countries of China. And I can imagine, I hope I am false, I'm wrong in my fear, but I can imagine that in case that India should go more and more nearer to the BRICS and to the all what BRICS involves, that there will be those who will make everything in order that the relationships between Pakistan and India become worse. That is, in order to destabilize India, of course. I am afraid that the curtain which has risen up through the war in Ukraine, but there were the precedents of the 8th war of Donbass and the questions of Maidan, for instance, in Kiev. But before all this, I think that if we want to speak about the actual situation, we have to speak, in my opinion, of the war in Yugoslavia, in the former Yugoslavia, because this was what opened the curtain of going against Russia through the dissolution of Yugoslavia and through the progressive humiliation of Serbia. That is, Belgrade was a preparation for Moscow and for the war of today. I think that we will see a continuous attempt of destabilization. I hope I am wrong, but I am afraid really that we will see continuous attempts at destabilization of all the countries which belong to BRICS. Russia, we see Taiwan, we see with as Taiwan is used against China. I'm afraid, really very afraid of the relationship between Pakistan and India and of other countries which could be open. I think that we perhaps should think, a last observation, of Great Britain and US as one body, one nation, because it is really the dominance of colonialism, of neocolonialism, with the exploitation of the same model, which is going on and on in this period, in the last 30 years, before also, of course, and we can see enormous, in my opinion, signs of prosecution of the same politics.
Okay.
Over the
Okay.
past century. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
so two quick comments, Firstly, I don't, sorry, but I don't agree to you that BRICS is going to be a problem for us, because, we will need to have cordial relationships with Russia and China for sure. We cannot
No, I don't think that is a problem. I think, no, it is I am for BRICS, of course. The problem is those who opposite BRICS, that is, in particular, UK and US, will make everything in order to attack the countries which are a member of BRICS. That is, either you are a colony as Western Europe, because we are a colony of UK and US, or if you go the way of independence, which is, in my opinion, the right way, but you will be under attack of UK and US in the way. I am for BRICS, of course, but the question is, I think that they will oppose BRICS and the rising of BRICS and the rising in importance of BRICS with whichever method they have, UK and US. This is my point. That is, I'm sorry,
see,
I did not express
Professor.
myself. I did not express
Yes.
myself well.
No.
There are these blocks. BRICS is going up without any doubt, but BRICS will be under attack. That is, BRICS, all the countries which are members of BRICS will be under attack by US and UK. This is my fear. I hope I am wrong.
Professor, the thing is that India is not just part of BRICS, but it's also part of many other organizations which are pro-US and pro-UK, pro-Australia, pro-France. So as far as India is, my major concern would be my own country, for example, and, to see that, the best, not only just for India, for example, but for the world we have been speaking. But as far as India is concerned, we are a member of many of the other developing and the developed world groups. So, so I guess they would not target India for that matter. And Russia and China are quite self-sufficient in themselves, because they are now good friends. They were good friends earlier also, but now much better friends. And destroying them in any way would be very dangerous for US and UK if they do try and do so. So I guess Russia and China are very powerful countries. They are not like you just can't, they're not like Sudan or something that you can just do about anything to them. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now quickly we will have a few reflections. I request Dr. Tamanna to please take note and come towards the end. Now, Randhir and Minati, some thoughts from you both, please. Randhir? Hello,
Yeah,
Minati.
hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Tamanna, for the very vivid description of these things. But what I would say that I'm very, I don't have very deep understanding about the international relations. So just I was curious about the one simple question, like what is the Chinese view on Russia-Ukraine war? So if you could answer.
China is favoring, obviously, China is trying to, first of all, obviously they are like favoring Russia. But the fact is that, Chinese Prime Minister has been, Chinese Premier has been has been talking to Ukraine, Zelensky, and trying to build a neutral situation where the war ends as fast as possible. So, I mean, one thing about China is that, now it started asserting itself as far as the dialogue between nations are concerned, which was the earlier, which was the role of US and Western powers. Now China has taken over the position in global south, for example. India is also doing the same. For example, now we are trying our level best, and in G20, Zelensky wanted to participate, but I guess some Russian pressure or something, they did not have Zelensky come to G20 summit. But so we are also taking a position, so is China.
Okay, thank you. Randhir, please. Randhir is there, Minati?
Not there.
Okay.
I
So
think he's-
then, so now Minati, you can please come.
Okay, thank you. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Swadhyasa Chakra and Vishwaneedam Center, would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Dr. Tamanna Khosla, for her brilliant presentation and explaining everything so nicely. Thank you, ma'am. We are grateful to you. I would also like to thank Professor Ganluigi for always being present with us and offering his very valuable insights. Thank you so much, sir. And I also would like to thank all our Facebook participants and the Zoom platform participants for being present with us and learning. And please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name personally. And thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Tamanna, and thank you, Minati.
Thank you.
So we'll continue the conversation. Say namaste. So it is a very interesting work. Have you been to China
No, sir, not as yet.
and Russia?
No.
Well, your description of the internal dynamics there is very, I was reading your note that you had sent me. Yes.
It's all read actually, sir, and newspaper articles, etc. So those kind of things. Yeah.
You speak both the languages a bit, Russian and Chinese?
Not as of now, but probably I'll learn. I want to learn, yeah.
So we can begin by saying Kagdilan.
Yes, sir.
And pasiva means thank you, pasiva.
Okay. Sure, sir.
Yeah, Russia is a very beautiful society.
Yes,
And
sir.
I have been there, but the great tragedy is the, entrenched authoritarianism, and so is China and Russia and India also. I think your description of India, you say we have a constitution, but this constitution is most of the time a piece of paper. So in reality, therefore,
Yeah.
and the challenge of life and dignity, and
Yeah.
what is happening in Manipur in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Therefore, the ethnic cleansing that you refer to in Russia and China, it is also, the cruel reality in India.
That's why I said the rightist rises, seen everywhere in the world right now. We have a kind of very similar policies happening worldwide, if you see. There is not just one country which is following it. It's like everywhere, you see the rise of right in a big way. And genocide, etc., are like followed Pakistan everywhere, So these kind of things are like very now becoming common. And despite the fact that we have political discourse against these things, and we have a lot of our thinkers who have spoken about multiculturalism, etc., but are they really respected? I'm yet to witness that, because that's not really happening.
Yes. And what you write about the China model in the note, that it is state repression. So therefore, the reality is the model of state repression getting globalized now.
Yes.
So then, thank you for your presence. So पंजाबी में कैसे बोलूँगा thank you? तुम्हें की हाल है?
धन्यवाद ही बोल दीजिए.
अच्छा, धन्यवाद. So सत श्री अकाल, and
ठीक है
so
सर.
we'll meet again. Good night.
Sure.